Hey everybody, welcome back to VectorSigma.info. Dan here, and today we're talking about the deck below, Galaxy Prime. This is the deck that the majority of VectorSigma.info decided to run. I believe 6 of 7 of us ran it. The only reason why John Palmer didn't read it was because he may have not got the late memo that I've kind of talked about before in some of the final conversations, and I know Scott and Vince are talking about it on Tech Talk and stuff like that. But I wanted to get into this deck, and I wanted to talk about it and why it succeeded and how easily it can be changed based on your situation. Um, so first and foremost, let's take a look at the characters. We have General Optimus Prime, Galactic Commander. He is the big daddy of them all. He is the reason why this deck works. Um, you know, we I know that Andrew Duvall, my teammate from PPG, he was working on this list for a while, and he had been flipping back and forth between Skydive and Fireflight. Fireflight was kind of just a character to eat up an attack and give you another ranged character when in doubt. Um, I know early on Thursday night that I kind of showed George Machado why Fireflight is not the best option for this list and why Skydive was going to turn out to be a better and more correct play for them. At the time of those testing games, I had no idea that I would be piloting the deck myself, but things happen. I've kind of talked about it on other stuff, so if you want to hear about it, go check out Finals Conversations with Stefan. But Skydive is definitely the better choice as a whole for this list. The tough 2 plus the innate tough 1 from Flame War just gives you so much life. Just every time you just look at him and you're like, okay, he's going to defend like 5 or 6 and maybe more depending on whites and double blues, etc. But he just doesn't die. And if you are able to hit him with a laser cutlass or hit him with an Energon axe, he will do damage. If there's multiple matrices on Optimus Prime, all these things really add up over the course of the game. And if he might attack 3, maybe even 4 times, to be honest, depending on how much they want to commit into your Skydive. And if you start adding that damage up, if he has an Energon axe on him, that's a 6 attacker attacking 4 times. Like, those numbers add up. He will kill things. If you throw bigger they are on him, throw a leap in a battle, and any of those things, like he can hit. Like, he can legitimately do a ton of damage and survive along the whole way. Flame War. I don't know when this happened, but at some point in life, I guess, Flame War has an innate bravery attached to her where when you're playing Flame War, everyone believes that you have to kill the Flame War. So it's almost like the other 2 characters don't even matter until Flame War is off the board. So it's a pretty awesome trait apparently to have, but it's a big deal. Like, yeah, like his tough 1 is huge. It just adds +1 defense to every defense flip, at minimum most of the time. And then on top of that, his flip back to bold, believe it or not, I may have done it like once a game, to be completely honest with you. I may have made that flip to bold once a game. That's how strong it can be on your General Optimus attacks. Depends on game state and like how much you like really need to hit an upgrade. I spent a lot of time checking my scrap pile and deciphering my hand and looking at how many cards were left and what the amount of utilities that were left that were useful, the blue and the orange count. There was a lot of math involved and a lot of the decisions I made to go through when I wanted to flip Flame War for the bold and when I thought it was necessary to try and better my odds to get things. So it definitely happens. So those are their character lineup. I'm going to get into the actions to start. So this is the actions of the deck. As you can see below me is the whole deck list. So it's all there. It's on multiple websites. And I kind of just wanted to quickly go through these cards and try and give you an understanding of why we played them. Leap into battle, bigger they are, marksmanship. All 3 of these cards are pretty self-explanatory for this deck. Leap into battle was just made to go big. I had gotten Optimus Prime to 15 plus attack on multiple occasions throughout the day and throughout the weekend as a whole. And sometimes you just do that, and sometimes you just kill Battlefield Legends. Like, if you go and watch the finals, it's exactly what happened in the final game. Like, I just had a weapon, had a leap into battle, swung, revealed an orange. Like, your Optimus Prime just all of a sudden can just hit for 15 damage and just kill things. And it's a big deal. The bigger they are, stack incredibly well with the Matrix of Leadership that gets freely attached to your character quite often. All of a sudden, your Flame Wars and your Skydives are just dealing Pierce 5, which is great. I played against the Jetfire, and it mattered even in that matchup to where my Galaxy Prime was able to guarantee a Pierce 6 turn because I had an Energon Axe as well. So it's like, sometimes like that just happens and it's great, but really it's just meant to stack with the Matrix of Leadership. Like, this deck is a phenomenal Matrix of Leadership deck, not only because like your big guy is so huge and Matrix doesn't go away, but you also get to freely attach it, so you don't even have to waste your upgrade play to play the Matrix. So constantly now, bigger they are becomes this phenomenal card for your little guys that stick around because you're a blue deck and you have the tough. So like, once again, this is another phenomenal card for your Skydive attacks. If you get a Noble's Blaster on Skydive and he has Pierce 2 against whatever Decepticon you might be attacking, you throw in this, you have Pierce 6, you throw on the Matrix, it's Pierce 7. Your Skydive just dealt 7 damage. And it happened all day. Like, it's nothing to threat about. It's a real legitimate threat in all honesty. So you have to definitely be weary of that card in this deck specifically. Marksmanship is like, don't go home without it. Like, don't leave home without it. It's just that good. You need some type of direct damage in the deck, and for a Vector Sigma list as a whole, this is very low on direct damage across the board. So this card is definitely a requirement for the deck. You never know when exactly you're going to need to play that card. It's a very, very sway card. The free off attack, happens all the time. You can kill a character out of combat, and you can kill a character that they weren't expecting because of the extra 2 damage type scenario. It's just a phenomenal card. Sabotage Armaments is the only secret action in this deck, and it's honestly it's very good against everything that has weapons, obviously, but it's actually really, really good in the control on control matchups, because like, since you're both blue decks, when you can take away their weapons and you have 21 health and you have like the Flame War and stuff like that, like, their base attack plus flips, it's not going to do a lot of damage. You're talking about Shockwave. Like, if you armaments a Shockwave, he has 7 attack or 6, depending on which mode he's flipping in. So when he attacks, if he flips 1 orange, we'll just say, all right, he goes to 8 attack, and you already have 2 starting defense. You have your 2 flips. You have a Flame War flip. You have a potential armor flip. You may honestly just end up taking 1 from Shockwave's attack when you play armaments. And on top of that, now they have to go back and get their weapons back and reset up the whole time, where you're kind of cheating because you're attacking in your mode and getting free upgrades to just make it easier on yourself. So there's turns where you get 2 upgrades on your Optimus Prime, and it's like, you're just moving ahead just by design of the character, where they have to like now reset up their character type scenario. It's a very, very strong card against those matchups. And obviously, it's just as fine against grenade launchers and all those other fun orange cards. We'll move to the left. We have Reprocess. Reprocess is just a don't leave home without this card. I don't care if you're aggressive, if you're controlish. Like, this card is that strong. People that are still playing Smelt, people that are still playing Vaporize or Ramming Speed, take out the orange, take out the blue, play Reprocess. 9 out of 10 times, the 2 health won't matter. It won't. It just won't matter. Like, this card is phenomenal. It's good in every deck in existence, and you should seriously start just playing it. I know there's guys that love their Vaporize, and there's guys that love their Ramming Speeds because they're on color. This card is worth every single cent to play over those cards, because you can always have it. You, like, whenever you need it, you just get it. Whenever that card shows up on any battle icon flip, 90% of the time you should just take it. I had a game in the I think it was the top 4, maybe it was the finals, I can't remember, but like, I had a game where like I flipped it on the second turn of the game and I threw away a card. I'm like, I'm gonna need this card, and 2 turns later I end up reprocessing my own Field Communicator to heal 2 from my own character, and I won that game because my General Optimus was left on 1 health. Like, it's plays like that are designed that even if your opponent doesn't have anything worth taking, you have cards in your deck that are worth removing later in the game. because you're going to get better cards, So it's that strong of a card that everyone should consider playing this at least as a one of in almost every deck in the format. We're going to move down. Security Checkpoint is, in my opinion, one of the most strongest cards in the game. I was on stream for all 3 rounds in the top 8, and I'm telling you right now, if you watch and you really pay attention, most of my games are won on the turn that I play Security Checkpoint. That's how strong the card is. Like, you play a Sparring Gear, play Checkpoint. You remove Bashing Shields. You remove Grenade Launchers. You remove Shockwave Weapons. This card just completely obliterates opponents' certain games. It's phenomenal if on their attack they go and they get their Bashing Shield. And you're like, all right, cool. Play my Sparring Gear, play Checkpoint, remove your Bashing Shield, and now you don't have a way to get rid of my Sparring Gear. And on top of that, you probably took whatever other playable upgrades they had in their hand along with it. And it's just that strong. And on top of that, all of it, it's a double blue. Like, this card is, without a doubt, throughout the entire year of Transformers, has won me more games than any other card that I have played. I can't talk enough about it. That's how phenomenal it is. We'll move to the right column. Incoming Transmission, for me, is a very, very love-hate card in this deck. It almost feels necessary, but it also feels unnecessary. The orange count is really the main factor because you need to play a certain amount of oranges in this deck to be able to guarantee your triggers. And along the way, when you play this card, you can set up the top of your deck and manipulate it that way. So it has perks throughout the game, but it's also, to me, it's incredibly unnecessary, where you don't ever actually need to proc with Optimus Prime. You don't ever actually need, when you flip back, to play the extra action. So, there's so many things that, like when they happen, it's great, but I don't feel that you actually need to set them up for it to matter. And I know that's kind of hard to see, but, if you watch some of those games, I may not have ever once triggered Optimus Prime on attack, and I may have never once flipped him back and played an action. So, when you start thinking about those things and how the deck operates, of, if you don't need to flip and hit those cards, you don't need to flip back and play the actions, and the deck can still perform at a high level against most of the format, you start to wonder if you actually need it or not. Alright, so now if we look at the Equipment Enthusiast and the Work Overtimes. 4 white pips in the deck out of 6. And I think that's 2 of the most crucial things. The other big things they do is that these cards are very, very crucial in the Shockwave matchup. You basically play a pretty even, fair matchup against them the whole time, as they're stripping your cards and stuff like that, and they're putting you down. But the moment you draw a Work Overtime or Enthusiast, you just take over the game. Because, now all of a sudden you just drew 4 cards, or you just drew, 4 or more cards with Enthusiast type scenario. So you can really just completely take over the game. Not only the fact that you get to start with 4 more health than the Shockwave, and on top of that you get free upgrades along the way. And you're just always increasing your board state to try and outweigh them disrupting your hand. So it's cards like this that really turn the tide in the Shockwave matchup. And then even Disarm on top. Disarm's another one. The Shockwave is doing the exact same thing you're doing, where it's just building their Shockwave. It's very, very, even if they're playing cards like Hovercraft and they're, and stuff like that, they're not hovercrafting on Shockwave. They're hovercrafting a little guy, and it's +1 attack, and they get their 1 damage, and that's great. But really what they're doing is they're playing 2 weapons on the Shockwave. They're playing an armor on their Shockwave. They're playing utility on the Shockwave. So they're doing the exact same thing that you're doing. So the moment you disarm them and you set them back, they don't have a lot of great ways to play 2 upgrades out of their hand. They can't do what you can do in Incoming Transmission, one of your upgrades at the top, play an upgrade, attack with your Optimus, get a second upgrade. They don't have those plays like that. So Disarm just became a huge card in the Shockwave mirror, to where whenever you played it, you pretty much just won the game. And then on top of that, what it also represents is all the overwhelming advantage decks. In the top 8, I played against William Gomez, and he switched into Springer, and by that time I also bored another disarm. So I had 3 disarms in my deck. I played 3 disarms in the game, and he never really had a chance to ever get set up and ever be able to set the OA, even with the Springer flip of being able to play 2 upgrades and an 2 act. Like, he never got close enough to being able to do it. And then the one turn he did, I had a Sabotage Armaments as backup, and he knew I had it. So he didn't even attempt to go for it. So it's like, it's one of those things that this deck is like innately designed to actually compete with Overwhelming pretty well because of just the choices we made along the way. All right, so that are our actions. We'll get rid of these guys. We'll come down and we'll check out the upgrades. And I think the majority of these are pretty self-explanatory. And honestly, like, the more you look at this deck, I feel like it's a pretty basic level deck. And it has General Optimus, who is from Wave 4, but the majority of the list is actually based in Wave 1. And you can see some of the cards now. Matrix of Leadership, Energon Axe, Handheld Blaster, Ion Blaster of Optimus Prime. All these cards are very key cards in this deck. The Matrix is probably number 1. This is a card that over time I've really kind of started to get away from. I just didn't like it enough. I didn't think it did enough in any matchup to where it was ever going to matter. But in this matchup, in this deck, it's phenomenal because, like, your guy has 21 health and he gains 4 health over the course of the game once or twice, etc. Because of the energy packs. So, like, the moment you get an early Matrix, it just makes your other characters' attacks that much more meaningful. So the other thing is like, you know, cards like the one of Nobles Blaster. It's just good enough to have this card as a one of, because like you honestly need to have a weapon on your Optimus to like move the game forward at a good pace against the Blue Mirrors, and also just to be able to +2 with your weapon, and then a +3 with leap in a battle. All of a sudden your Optimus has 13 attack before it attacks. If it has a Matrix, it's 14 attack. If you flip an arms, 15 attack. So like all of a sudden, like, your Optimus Prime can just, you know, double its attack stat basically. And the moment you do that, you can just one-shot characters almost, and not like one-shot, but like if your Skydive dealt 2 or 3 damage to something earlier on in the game, well, now it might be in range to where Optimus just can come in and completely finish the job. The Handheld Blaster, I haven't really said this publicly yet, but on a lot of our Patreon deck techs, I had said several times that Handheld Blasters, it might be on the way out for majority of your blue control decks. And I think it's a combination of a couple things. Like, the card does have play in this deck because the Bold 1 isn't irrelevant. It does matter sometimes, especially just putting on your Optimus Prime to flip for extra cards to try and get extra upgrades back. You know, when in doubt, you just play it. You go up at a card, and then you just flip for a better weapon, probably. You're like, oh, I flipped, an energy pack, an ion blaster, etc. Like, well, I'll just go get my ion blaster now. So now I just have a better weapon, as a whole. And that's okay, like, for early on in the game attacks. But the second thing is the double blue. It's still very strong, but when you have 21 health and you have a Flame War and you have an efficient way to get sparring gears on your guy where you don't have to actually play it, you can just flip it and play it off the flip. A lot of these things go into the factor where, like, maybe you can cut that card and pick up 2 more cards somewhere else. And it shows itself already by it only being a 2 of, because I remember on Friday night when the deck was finally laid out in front of me and I'm really looking at it, like, I couldn't find a good option to get a third one in the deck that I was comfortable with without having more reps with the deck. And even now, I still think there's a better chance that I would take 1 or 2 of those out before I actually added another one in. And that just speaks, like, volumes about how good and how strong Optimus Prime is in this deck, and how easy it is to get up to 29, 34 health, 33 health type scenarios. So just something to think about, if you're trying to look and trying to make changes for the deck for yourself, that card's it could be a very easy card to cut. The other easy card to cut is the one standing next to it, which is Field Communicator. Field Communicator is one of those cards where it's like, it's great when it's great, and it's awful when it's awful. In the finals, I think I said this a little bit. I literally just played a field communicator on Optimus Prime just so I could reprocess it 2 turns later. Like it was just like, well, I'm gonna get +1 attack for my attack, and then next turn I'm gonna heal 2 by destroying it. There were times throughout the tournament where I did play field communicator on Skydive, and I did flip a laser cutlass, and I did flip an energy or Energon axe, or I did flip a bigger they are. You know, there was definitely times where it mattered, but most of the time it was a pretty weak play. One of the weaker plays that you can make in the deck as a whole. So that's another card that I can very easily see getting axed and getting removed for, other options. Energon Axe, probably, the second best weapon in the game behind Grenade Launcher. It's hard for me to argue otherwise. And I just mean like straight base attack weapon, not, Sturdy Javelin, not stuff like that. Sparring Gears, it just felt good enough. Maybe you want to reflex circuits in here. Maybe you want, the sturdy armor. Maybe you want one of those things. But for us, and this was not even just for the Galaxy Prime list. This was in a lot of our deck lists where like we got away from all the other armors and we're just playing 1 or 2 sparring gears, just because like they felt that good. And if someone's playing a gyro or something like that, then they were playing a gyro. Like it was just one of those where like this card across the board with all the characters that we were playing in almost all of our decks, it just turned out that like this just ended up being the best armor. When it stuck, great. When it didn't, oh well. Moving down to the bottom, Energy Pack is the secondary MVP of this deck. Falls right below the security checkpoints. Energy Pack is just strong. Like whenever you get to play an Energy Pack and turn your 21 health character into a 25 health character, and then God forbid you turn into a 29 health character, and I didn't do it once on the day. I never had triple Energy Pack, but I sat across from Scott Landis in round 7 and he had triple Energy Pack and I could not kill him. It's always been a good card. We played it at Gen Con in our General Optimus deck, and we thought it was really good there. You see it in Shockwave, you see it in all these high health character decks and these big guy decks. But this deck just utilizes it so well because it just gets to play them for free. So you don't have to waste your upgrade on it. You're just like, oh, I flipped it on my attack, so I'll just insert here. And that's pretty much the main deck. So we'll take a quick look at the side. Alright, so here's the board. First and foremost, I think the biggest thing for us as a whole was the idea that we didn't have a comfort zone of what we knew we absolutely lost to. So we played a couple cards for the unknown, and that's Point Blank Defense, or Point Defense System, and W5 Gyro Blaster. Both those cards were, because like if there was a Pierce deck that had the ability to pierce 25 damage against us, we just wanted to have a card that was prepared for it. It was like, well, we put this card in our deck. If we get to it, we get to it. Great, it's gonna matter. The Gyro Blaster was kind of the same thing as like, well, put this card in our deck. If we get to it, we get to it. It'll matter. It'll be really good against the bull decks. It'll be really good against even some of the tough decks type thing, where if you can kind of suit up one of your little guys, or you get Optimus suited up, like if you're just trading blows. Well, if you're just the bigger attacker, then you're just going to win that race. As long as you're not behind. But even the thing with Optimus is even when you were behind, you had more health than them. So it was kind of like you were on even keel anyway. And we played leaps and bigger they are and stuff like that to like increase our attack power. So it made a big difference in that scenario. The one-up Baton, Baton's just a good card. You never know who's going to come home with a Battle Master type thing. You never know who's going to be playing 3 Energon Axes and stuff like that. So, like, this card's just a solid card. There were also decks that were playing Javelin for melee or ranged, so you could kind of punish them if, like, they had a Javelin stick around type scenario, and, like, that actually did happen one time in the Swiss for me, where my opponent, put it on a character with melee, and he was like, oh, I'll just let it sit here until I flip the range, yada yada. And then like I was just like, oh, I'm gonna Baton that, and it was kind of a blowout because like he was saving the 2 damage to kill off a Skydive, and then like all of a sudden it was gone. So now my skydive got to live another round and attack another round. So yeah, it's a big deal. The third bigger they are was just, again, it was just for the mirrors. It was just to make your, not the mirrors, but like the control mirrors, just to make your little guys worth more often. I stated before how good the card was with Matrix and how good the card was, with another weapon, with Noble's Blaster or Energon Axe, like those things. So like, it's one of those cards that I could see end up being a 3 of in the main deck, and then you trying to figure out another card in the sideboard. The third disarm, this just comes down to it again. Like we didn't want to lose to Voltron decks. Even though we're Voltron, we're giant and we're gigantic, the card just sets everybody back so far that it's impossible for them to come back from it. And then like I said, once again, it was just kind of a down step of, we did think there was going to be a lot of overwhelming advantage, and the fact that we were going to have access to 3 of these in our deck, 3 sabotage armaments, 1 of baton, and the yeah. I don't even remember what I was thinking. I'm just gonna double check. Look at the 1 reprocess. Like, so you had access to all those things, and it just made it so incredibly hard for them to get through you, and for them to set up. So it just became a card that we just felt like, listen, like, I don't really want to play 3 of these, but like if I do, I know that I'm gonna just shore up that matchup completely and just take away everything from them, and they're just never going to have the chance to go off. And if they don't play overwhelming advantage, there's no way they're going to kill your Optimus Prime. It's just not going to happen. And last but not least, the remainder are the Pocket Processor, which is strictly, once again, it is for like the control mirrors in general, if you just want to keep like your hand up. And then it was really for Shockwave. Like, you just playing this card forces Shockwave to interact with you. It forces him to get rid of it, or you're gonna be able to come, like, very much easier get back in the game type scenario. And then last but not least is the 2 hidden fortifications and the 2 hovercrafts. The hovercrafts were just designed for more direct damage when you needed it. Example, like if Bugs was going to be a deck at the event, which we had assumed it was, this was just 2 more cards for ways to deal damage to Shrapnel. If Aerial Bots was going to be a deck, which I had seen some players playing Aerial Bots, it was a deck that I was even considering playing myself for a long time. Just deals 5 damage to Aerial Bots, which is probably, pretty strong in this deck. And then the hidden fortifications is just, it was just like one of those, like, where we're just going to shore up the aggro matchup. We're going to make sure that we can have this as a secondary layer of protection on turns with Optimus. It was very, very common that we would attack with Optimus second. So, like, what would end up happening is, like, I would play a secret action on that turn that I would attack, so I could, get rid of a guy, have protection, and then the next turn I'd play another secret action. So it was like one of those where I always wanted to have back-to-back secret actions to protect him through 2 turns. So adding in 2 more secret actions into the deck made those plays a lot easier and more accessible. And it also just gives the guessing game of armaments. Once again, it's like armaments is so strong that they're always trying to play around it. So if you can get them on those turns where they'll play a utility rather than playing their big weapon, next thing you know, you just flip hidden fortification. You're like, oh, well, he has tough 3 on top of all the other crap he has. And then of course the character was Turbo Board, which for what it's worth was played because the only thing that we weren't sure about, because once they announced the multi-mission gear ban, we didn't take the deck off our radar by any which means, but we took it out to a point where not everyone could easily play the deck efficiently. Multi-mission gear really made that deck just over the top powerful. So we assumed that at this point, if there were players that played Daring Escape, it would be a lot harder for them to win. And we didn't want to commit any of our battle deck in the sideboard to it. So we just said, you know what, we'll just play the turbo board as a comfort zone, and it will force them to have to kill the turbo board. And if they can't kill the turbo board, even if they can in whatever time frame that's going to be, you might be able to just slowly but surely kill them with your Optimus Prime. And that was kind of just the design play of the turbo board will hopefully gain you enough turns so where you can prevent them from winning. Moving forward, I think I think what I'm gonna do. So before we go into that, let's just talk about the deck as a whole now. Um, Galaxy Prime as a whole, this list, if you really look at the sideboard, and then you really look at the deck as a whole, it's very, there isn't many three ofs. Like there's three Matrix, there's three Marksmanship, there's three Security Checkpoints, and there's three Sabotage Armaments, and there's three Energy Packs. Everything else is a two of. And the reason for that is going into the Energon, the format was wide open. It's very hard to predict what people are going to play in an unknown format. So, like, if you know your format, if you know your metagame, and you know that you need and specifically want to attack certain things, then you can very simply change the numbers around a lot. If no one's going to play Overwhelming Advantage, maybe you probably don't need 3 disarms in your 50 cards. If it's a blue control mirror type scenario most of the day, then you want to go up to 3 bigger they are. So you don't need the second leave in the battle. You might not need leave in the battle at all. If there's a lot of 4 wide decks, a lot of 5 wide decks, then maybe you want to be able to play cards like Hovercraft. You might want to be able to play cards like Sturdy Javelin, for example. And then even the sideboard. The sideboard's very interchangeable. Like we didn't really see a Pierce deck succeed at Energon. It doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, but we didn't see one succeed enough to where we should warrant a point defense system in the sideboard. Because like if the deck isn't there, no one has figured it out, then like maybe it doesn't matter, because if they're only getting to like Pierce 5 or 6 against you, then they have to hit you 5-6 times in order to win the game, and that doesn't include any other things, for example. But it's one of those where you might just be able to just get away without playing that card. The Enforcement Baton's another one. Like it's a solid card as a whole, but like with 3 Sabotage Armaments, with the disarms, with the reprocess, like maybe that card should just be another reprocess type scenario. The Hidden Fortifications and the Handheld Blasters as a whole, once again, I said a little bit earlier, like if you're going into a heavy aggro setting, then you probably want 3 Handheld Blasters, and you probably want to try and find a way to main deck Hidden Fortifications just to protect Optimus a little bit more against those wheel turns. But that's kind of the whole point of this deck, is that this deck was like a 50-50 deck in the idea of it's going to give you a matchup against everything that you thought you were going to play. And then for what it's worth, me personally, I played against 6 different decks in the Swiss and 3 different decks in the top 8, and on the weekend I only had 5 game losses total. I had 2 losses to Adam Bixler, I had 1 loss to Ian, 1 loss to Jimmy, and 1 loss to Scott Landis. That's it. So I had 5 game losses. Other than that, I either 2-0'd or 3-0'd every matchup. And it was just a wide variety of decks. And pretty much anything you can think of throughout the course of the weekend is what I played against. And it just had game against everything. Like, your guy just lives. He lives forever. He gets free energy packs and he just goes off. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, like I said, you swing for 15, 16 damage and you're just killing things out of nowhere. And it's across the board. I think it's one of the better designed decks in the format. I think Andrew Duvall put a ton of time into this list throughout the whole month of November and really got it to this very even keel part to where it is set up for an unknown meta, but it can be tampered with to target specific matchups if they're going to be there. So yeah, that's the whole list. I'm going to run down the stats real quick, just so you guys can truly understand the power of what this deck did. In the top 32, there were 5 of us that played this deck that all made top 32 with it. Andrew Duvall was 4-2, George Machado was 5-1, Scott Lennis was 5-1, I was 5-1, Vin was 5-1, all playing this deck. Me, Scott, Vin, all had just built the deck the night before, piggybacked off Andrew's work, and it was we all just succeeded with the deck across the board as a whole. Scott Landis' only loss, his 5-1 loss, was to me in flipping whites. My only loss was to Adam Bixler, in his Tailwind deck. And I can't speak for everyone else. I don't know exactly what everyone else lost to and didn't lose to. But, this deck is very, very strong. It's a very, very big force. And you can go and you can watch those games. I played in all 3 rounds of the top 8, so the information is there. You can see how those games played out against 3 very different decks at the end of the day. And and to try and get an idea of what this deck is really about and what this deck is really capable of. As a whole, I wanted to thank everyone again for giving me the shout outs and, for just, congratulating me. Thanks again to the team who, really pulled together, and even in the final hour of deciding we're going to play this deck, building the sideboard, and then everyone on the team that played the deck, pretty much the majority of it, all did very, very well with this list. And like I said, in the end, it's definitely interchangeable to where your meta is. If you just need to tink this here, tink that there, I think it's very, very possible that you could warp this to play whatever you want, however you want it to play. All right, so thanks again, guys. It was a great weekend once again. This deck performed well for 6 players. At the end of the day, so it's a phenomenal deck, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. And see you guys next time.